Hi, my name is Aaliyah Sadana, and regarding this week's prompt, I decided to talk about Mapp versus Ohio and Brown versus Mississippi. Mapp versus Ohio occurred in 1961, and essentially this case was about search warrants. This case started when police got a tip about a suspect involved of a bombing was hiding in Joel Ray Mapp's house. The police then broke into Mapp's house without permission and had found illegal materials in her house. Those same materials the police had found were then used against her in court and got her arrested and convicted. However, Mapp's lawyers argued that the evidence found should not be admissible in court because it would be a violation to her 14th Amendment right. Ultimately, the courts decided in favor of Mapp, saying that police should have a search warrant to search her personal house. It had barred the use of evidence obtained through illegal searches because it was a violation of her 14th Amendment. This case was important to the reform era because it had reinforced the idea that citizens are entitled to protection from surprise searches and basically the police overstepping their boundaries. It had also required police to obtain search warrants when they wanted to go through an individual's belongings. According to the author Stuntz, this law was originally placed to promote equality between the rich and the poor. However, it had led to more aggressive policing in minority neighborhoods, and it also inadvertently increased higher arrest rates and created mass incarceration rates. And moving on to Brown, Mississippi. Brown, Mississippi occurred in 1936, and it was a landmark case in the U.S. during the Reform era. This case had came about when a slave named Ed Bauer and two other of his fellow slaves were accused for the murder of his white landlord. When deputies got whiffed of this, of them being responsible of the case, they then started beating them until they got a confession out of them. And those same confessions were then turned around and used against them in the courts to get them convicted for the murder of his white landlord. These confessions were really the key components of getting them convicted. The courts ultimately, when looking back at that case, the courts ended up ruling that confessions that were obtained through force and violence would not be admissible in court. And this was because it was also a violation of their 14th Amendment right and their right to a due process in court. And from this case, after the ruling, 30 years now, the courts have overturned many convictions that was similar to Brown's case, as in it overturned convictions that got people convicted through confessions that were gained by violence and force. This significance, the law helped this law helped establish that confession should be voluntary and voluntary to be able to use in court, and it helped people say their truth without fear. However, although this law was placed for the good of people, it inadvertently kind of hurt us. The author Stuntz had told it. The author Stuntz has told us that the overturn of the law by the Supreme Court the consequence of this law was that Supreme Court's rulings applied regardless of if the defendant was guilty or not. So if these confessions were taken by violent force, whether they were guilty or not, it didn't matter. They were let free. And this also led to no coerced confessions were allowed, nor was confessions under psychological pressure was allowed. Thank you for listening.